Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Wrestling Tonight. Just like the Road Warriors here at the Turnbuckle Tavern, we snack on danger and dine on death. I am always the ace of the tavern, live from the No Sale Studios, Acefield Retro, joined as always by the one bad Chad. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot, man. Good week of wrestling. It seems quiet. Is it just me? For Mania season, it seems a little quiet.
A little too quiet, and I think the Rawdown boys alluded to it. Maybe they're withholding information a little bit closer to the chest, practicing for the gambling that will be going on in the future. But I don't know. You're right. It feels like this is a calm before the storm, or in the eye of the tornado, whatever you want to talk about, hurricane or whatever the hell it is. The fact that GCW made our top three is kind of a weird anecdote to talk about, especially since we're at Mania season.
Yeah, and we want to share the love. You know, we don't want our big three stories to always be WWE and AEW for you guys. So I love spreading the love to the companies that we enjoy. But it is weird, like you said, calm before the storm, eye of the hurricane, whatever this is. I feel like with this sell looming for WWE, I just get a little uneasy when it gets quiet like this. I feel like we're on the verge of something big.
Yeah, it's quiet, a little too quiet, but you know what? We're still going to bring the noise. Let's get to our big three stories and get you guys caught up for the week in wrestling.
Let's do it.
Big story number one here, and let's just talk about it right now. Masha Slamovich is the GCW champion. She dethroned Nick Gage, which, I mean, this is a very, very long reign that we saw from Nick Gage. He won the title back at GCW Fight Club Night 1 on October 8th, 2022. He's been a dominant champion. There's been moments in time that even we were speaking about that we thought he would be dethroned by potentially Blake Christian. Maybe someone else would have taken off of him, but lo and behold, it's Masha Slamovich. And I want to say right now, I could not be happier. I love this booking decision. I love what Masha has done, not only in GCW, but in Impact as well, across multiple indies. What else can you say, man? I am a huge fan of what they did here.
Yeah, I think this was for me. I'm stoked on it. I think it's something different. I will say I'm a bit shocked, honestly. Like if you would have told me a year ago, would Masha be in the position to go for the world title? I don't know if I would have said I believe that. I think it's awesome though. It's so different. It's so progressive, but it is like. Does it feel like it came out of the blue to you, Ace, or like how do you feel about this
Oh,
Masha being in this position?
certainly. It definitely felt like it came out of the blue. Like if this was Yameshita winning the title, it felt like, okay, she had the Ultraviolent Championship. They built her up all year. And then she took on Nick Gage and beat him. Yeah, that probably would have made more sense. Not make sense, but to feel like there's been momentum. But I think what makes GCW this super independent in the best way possible is that at any given week or month, they can really build up towards this match and make people feel like it's important. I mean, Masha's gotten some wins throughout GCW. She's been dominant. She's taken some L's as well. But I think the stagnancy that is Nick Gage's title run right now needed to be switched up. And maybe it was a decision that they came to maybe a week before, 2 weeks before. It feels like it isn't long-term planning. Like this was not something they probably had in their plans. I don't think they knew who was taking the title off Nick Gage, but I have to say the fact that it's Masha feels different. As you mentioned before, it feels progressive. This is something that a lot of companies would not do. And I think they are the industry leader in a lot of ways of taking risk and making decisions that a lot of wrestling companies won't. Because now you look at their two main champions. Masha's their GCW champion, the world champion, and Rina Yameshita is their ultra-violent champion. And this is the same company that had Ali Catch winning the tag titles. Like this is as progressive as it gets in a very good way. And I mentioned this on the show multiple times, and people don't like to hear it, but intergender wrestling is the future of wrestling. And eventually it's going to leak into WWE and AEW. It might take 5 years, but I think GCW is ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I think a place like this, a place like GCW, they have the good fortune of being able to make decisions like this without outside influence really dictating what you do. Because I mean, let's be honest, WWE, AEW, they're serving a lot of masters as far as their sponsorship partners, the ratings, all of that. So I feel like companies like that are a little more hesitant because GCW is a hardcore fan base and a pretty young, forward thinking fan base where they're very quick to accept things that I don't know if the masses that are tuning in to USA, Fox, and Turner are going to accept. You know, when I look at like Masha and even Effie, you know, would a character like that, how would that go over on the major platforms? It's an unfortunate reality of, you know, just society in general.
Right.
But that's the beauty of GCW is they're not serving those masters. They can really book to how they feel. And I love that they take swings like this. I mean, I was a big fan of Bussy when they
Hmm.
had the tag titles, Alley Catch and Effie. But I like that we have a company out there that can take these swings. Um, I wonder how big or how soon something like this could trickle into those top promotions. I feel like it's inevitable, but there is a hesitancy. I thought Tony Khan might venture into something like this a little quicker, but you know, I'm thinking back to the first year of AEW, he gave interviews where like he was even kind of against intergender wrestling, which was kind of shocking because AEW likes to play up the we're a progressive company,
Hmm.
uh, all inclusive. So, how do you think? Like, I know you're big on this being the future. How soon could we see this? Like, what do you think?
I mean, if you look at, take the temperature of different things that happen in wrestling, follow the path of hardcore wrestling, how it took to get to WWF. So ECW, if you look at 95, 1994, it took about 5, 6 years for it to really trickle into what we're seeing on the main, USA program on Raw. So I think right now what we're seeing, it took till like 98, 99 for the hardcore championship to be, reimagined in WWF land, and then they get all the credit for it. But that's a 5, 6 year window. So intergender wrestling is not new. Let's not get that out of the way. I mean, we can go back to, 5, 6 years ago happening on the indies. Look at Candice LeRae, Joey Ryan. Intergender wrestling has been happening for a while now. But I think GCW is that bridge from the independents, what's like popular on the independents, and then getting it towards the mainstream. And I think GCW is that bridge. I don't think GCW is mainstream, but there's enough crossover that I think it can eventually get there. As far as AEW, WWE, I think AEW is more likely to do it, but at this point, it seems like Tony Khan has been very hesitant to upsetting the masses. And imagine when the reaction that would be to, from the Jim Cornettes and from those other people that speak out on Twitter and social media and say the things that they say about AEW because of the way that Omega and the Bucks wrestle. Can you imagine, someone like Masha coming into the company and beating a guy like John Moxley? For them, it would be unfathomable. Like, I think that's something that Tony Khan has shown that he maybe isn't as thick skinned as we probably gave him credit for in the beginning. And that might just be because, again, they have a lot of money on the line. TBS and Turner and eventually whoever else is going to have access to this product. He has to please them as well. So I don't think he wants to take that risk until he can test the waters, dip his toe in, and say, I think everybody's ready to handle this. But I love that GCW did this. As you mentioned before, Bussy being the tag champs and the way women are presented on this product. Like, we can give the women's evolution all the credit in the world. You could say how great women's wrestling's been, and they main evented WrestleMania, and WWE is in a better place than they were 15 years ago. But this is how women should be represented in wrestling. They are equal to the men there, and they're able to hold their own. This is, again, Rena Yameshita, and I can't sing her praise. I know Slamovich is the one that won the title, but watching Rena on a given night in GCW, she's probably the toughest motherfucker in wrestling. No joke. Like, and it's not just the hardcore deathmatch stuff. She's a tough human being, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that is, I watch GCW wrestling, and in that bubble, it exists in this reality. And that's what wrestling is. Sometimes you have to extend belief and wrestling is, that type of entertainment. It doesn't have to be, oh, there's no way Charlotte could beat Roman Reigns, but it's about presentation. She can't beat Roman Reigns because of how they've both been presented for their whole existence on the roster. And that's the complete difference between in philosophy of GCW and then these other promotions.
Well, dude, go back to when Rena won that ultra violent title against Alex Colon. I mean,
Right.
that was an absolute classic. Yeah, I've always been um I'm open to it but I just take this. It's all in how you do it, man. Anything in wrestling is possible. It's just in how you present it. And I feel like GCW presents it in a very believable way where each competitor they feel like equals. I go back, there was a match maybe a year ago. I can't remember the event. I believe it was when they were in Los Angeles at the Ukrainian Cultural Arts Center. It was Thunder Rosa and Tony Deppen.
Right.
Crazy hard hitting match. A lot of fun. And you bought in.
Mm-hmm.
There was no like, oh, this is a guy, this is a girl. You did not give a shit about that. You were bought into the drama of the match. Now, you said something that I want to kind of go off of is that Tony would be maybe a little hesitant to make this move with all the criticism they get. And I could not agree more. I think for this to transition into the major companies, I think it's going to have to be the industry leader to make that move before AEW would do it. I think just from philosophy standpoint, AEW would probably do it first, but I think Tony would be crucified if he did this. Look at how people have reacted to Orange Cassidy. Look at how people reacted to Sonny Kiss, Nyla Rose, all of the bullshit that they've had to endure over stuff like that. You put a woman in your world championship position in AEW right now, dude, the IWC would light up and attack them so brutally. But say you throw Charlotte Flair in there against Randy Orton, I think they're going to be a little more accepting of a company like that doing it, and that would open the doors for everyone else. That being said, I don't think we can have this discussion about this topic without giving some major props to Impact Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Because Impact Wrestling has a little bit bigger of a stage than a GCW, and they did this with Tessa Blanchard.
100%.
You know, she had the amazing feud with Sami Callihan, and that feud pulled me back into Impact. I'll be honest; it was so well done. Tessa won the title. She ended up, I think she vacated it because of contract issues when the pandemic hit, and
Yep.
it never really paid off. But speaking of Impact, Masha is set to challenge Mickie James for the world title at Sacrifice on March 24th. So things are getting interesting for Masha, man. She's all over the place. She's aligned herself with Bully Ray. Now she's going after the Impact Women's World Championship, and she has the big belt in GCW going into that match. It's a great time for progressive booking, and it's a great time for Masha Slamovich.
It also shows a lot of what GCW is able to do where, I mean, Jon Moxley was a one-off for them, but like guys can go into different companies and girls can go into different companies and lose, but it doesn't affect their standing in the GCW roster because GCW has this ecosystem of fans that they have a hierarchy that just exists because it exists. And if Masha loses to Mickie James at Sacrifice March 24th, which we'll preview in the week ahead, it doesn't really affect Masha's standing. And I think that can't be said for other companies. If a guy goes in, and that's always the discussion. We talk about the Giant Baba, we talk about the Antonio Inoki, the Forbidden Door. How can we get Gato and Tony Khan to exchange wins with these different guys on rosters? Like Jay White's got to get his win back. GCW doesn't matter in that way because they exist and they draw based on that. Like just because I guarantee you the next GCW show or Masha shows up with the title and they're like, oh wait, she's lesser than because she lost to Mickie. That's not the case with GCW. And it's a beautifully done, beautifully constructed roster and story that they create on a monthly, bi-weekly, sometimes monthly basis with these world title matches. I'm just a huge fan of this. And again, Masha is, you know, breaking the mold from what it used to be for men to wrestle women. And China and now Rhea Ripley, there's been some kind of conversation about Rhea getting into like the Intercontinental title picture, maybe the world title picture, but it has to be like booked in this gimmicky way by WWE. Like China was she was the ninth wonder of the world. They had to make it look like it was crazy. But I mean, WWE did this with Jeff Jarrett and China and Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho gave so much to China in that match.
Yep.
And it never really caught fire because China was a 101. She wasn't considered, she just was a 101. Like she was outside the box. And I don't think, maybe we'll go back to that moment and say 1999 when they had the Good Housekeeping match. Like that might have been like, okay, this is the precursor for all the other intergender wrestling. I guess time will tell. But This is different. I think with Masha being GCW champion, she was on an equal playing ground. It wasn't about her gender at all in this, at all. It didn't matter who, male, female. She was just a tough son of a bitch who choked out Nick Gage, choked him out.
Yeah, choked him out. And we have a clip of her winning the victory, the getting the title. Gotta play it. For the people on audio, you gotta go watch the live video on YouTube. But for the people watching on YouTube, check out Masha taking home GCW gold. Pretty
Awesome.
cool moment, man. So before we move on to topic number 2, what's just your overall thoughts right now on the recent GCW world title picture? Mox held it for a long time and then, dropped it to Nick Gage in that title versus career match. And now Nick Gage, after kind of a short little run with it, drops it to Masha. What's your just overall thoughts on the title picture there?
I think the best thing to inject some liveliness into the division was to get it off of Nick Gage. And it's not, Nick Gage is a legend. He is what GCW was built on at all times, but I don't think he needs the title. I think other people would benefit, and the division should have meaningful stories that isn't just Nick Gage coming out. I love what they're doing with Nick Gage as an ambassador to the brand. And I mean, he can be active if he wants to be active, but again, doesn't need the title. I'm hoping that Masha can feud with the aforementioned Rina Yameshita. I mean, I would even take like building up a little bit more of Tony Deppen, like you mentioned before. He has been on sort of a cold streak as far as like presentation, but even like a guy like Willie Mack, who was in a losing effort in the opening match at Eye for an Eye, but something creative like that. I would love to see some new faces out there. So like personally, I would like to see Willie Mack in that picture. And also I would like to see Tony Deppen back up there and treated like a main eventer in GCW.
I wouldn't mind seeing like a Jordan Oliver get in there a little bit. I
like that as well.
Like I feel like there's a lot of now Nick Gage does not need that title.
Nope.
Nick Gage, you hit that fucking for whom the bell tolls. He comes out, crowd blows. He does not need a title. He is an attraction for that company. So I think now you're in a position where you can put together some just banger matches for your world championship with some of your young guns.
Yeah.
I think it's a good spot to be in now with Masha holding that gold.
100%. And with that being said, we talked about the young guns. Let's talk about someone who's in the, he's saying goodbye to his career. For story number 2, we have Great Muta going into the Hall of Fame, and I mean, well-deserved for a guy that's never stepped foot in a WWE ring. He has the resume, he has the accolades, he has everything deserving of this. And this is, we were talking about Great Muta, not just the fact the Hall of Fame stuff. We talked about him retiring earlier this year. I mean, he lost to Shinsuke Nakamura at the Noah event in January. Apparently, and this is all conjecture, again, we'll know eventually if Muta comes out and says it himself, but this apparent Hall of Fame induction is reportedly a trade-off for the match, where WWE wanted him to go into the Hall of Fame to boost up their lacking of Hall of Fame class in exchange for having Shinsuke go over to Pro Wrestling Noah. And that feels like an even exchange. I feel like Great Muta gets something out of it. Ric Flair is the guy who appeared on the bump to say he'd be inducted. So why not? I mean, they've wrestled probably 500 times, like between house show loops and live events. I don't think Great Muta gets the credit he deserves because of things like Fed Brain and things that exist in this world. Because wrestling, by the way, does exist outside of the walls of WWE, WWF. Um, and also, it happened before 1985 WrestleMania 1. There's wrestling that did happen, everybody. So
Yeah.
I'll let you speak to Great Muta because he was part of your fandom growing up. But a lot of the influence you see of these spooky characters, face painted guys, come from Great Muta, inspired, and moveset as well. Very innovative.
I mean, dude, Great Muta growing up he was one of those he was one of those spooky, we all say spooky, but just an enigma, just a
Yeah.
type of character you did not see, especially, this was prior to the Undertaker. This guy, he debuts 2 days after my first birthday. I was born in October 3rd of 83. He shows up in wrestling October 5th of 84. Dude's trained by Inoki, Matsuda, Yamamoto. Um, but I remember his run in WCW. Now, he had a short run in Puerto Rico. Then he went to World Class in Texas, had a little feud with Kerry Von Erich. But I remember his run from 89 to 91. So 89 and 90 in WCW. I guess technically at the time, you could say they were still NWA, WCW, but I mean, feuds with Lex Luger, his feud with Sting. You had the two face paints,
Yep.
all of his matches with Ric Flair. He came into the company introduced by his manager, the famous Gary Hart, and he was kind of dubbed the son of the Great Kabuki. I grew up, my dad always talked about the Great Kabuki. The spit. That's where this mist that Asuka and all of these guys are doing today, Kabuki originated that. Muta brought that in, and he was just something to behold, man. A man from another. Back when you were a kid and you were still bought into everything, he was like a man from another world for me. And there was just this aura about him. Tons of great just matches, but the match, it was kind of a over the top ridiculous match, but the match I always remember is Great Muta teaming up with Terry Funk to take on Sting and Ric Flair in the Thunderdome match. It was a big cage, not your traditional cage. It had a unique look to it. I believe it was a Halloween Havoc. I may be wrong. Um, there was weapons hanging off the cage. There's actually a moment where I believe who was it? It was either Flair or Funk gets caught on fire and they have to put it out.
Wow.
I think Muta even uses his spit to put out the fire. But I mean, it's a spectacle, man. But Muta, he's one of those characters that always captured my imagination. And you see, I know everyone's like, oh, the run in WCW was so short, 89 and 90. But you see the impact that, because when he came in 89, he was only 5 years into the business. And the impact that those 2 years had on the American audience, because you have Ric Flair talking him up on the bump. You have, who's the guy he wants to have one of his final matches with? Sting.
Right.
That little 2 year run really meant a lot to Great Muta. And it meant, you know, if it wasn't for those 2 years, would the American fan base be talking about Muta the way that we're talking about Muta today? I think today's fan doesn't realize how big of an impact this guy had on pro wrestling. I mean, he was kind of that, one of the forefathers of the face paint, the Jeff Hardy Enigma vibe. Like I just think he needs to get his love. I love Great Muta, always did as a kid, and it's really exciting to see. I've got my issues with the WWE Hall of Fame, but the fact that they can honor a guy like this, kind of similar to the way they did Jushin Thunder Liger, a guy who never really wrestled in the company. I know Liger came in and did like an NXT match with Tyler Breeze and all of that, but
Yep.
like the fact that they honored Muta, that shows you how big of an impact he has. Not many people who don't step through those WWE ropes get that honored. That in and of itself should tell you how important the Great Muta is.
Yeah, the same could be said. I mean, if you want to treat it like a legitimate Hall of Fame, we were just talking about baseball off air, but like the Baseball Hall of Fame recognizes people that never step foot on an MLB field because of their contributions to baseball. And the contributions for the international wrestlers that have come after Great Muta can't be understated. You have the fact that Great Muta was the first really American popular Japanese wrestler that made that path. It might have been somebody else, but if it wasn't him, I don't know if anyone else would have had the same success because he was so, as you mentioned before, he was an enigma and he was charismatic to the point without having to speak to the American audience. He captured their imaginations with the face paint and the mist. We spoke about the innovative offense, but moves that are still used today. I mean, the Shining Wizard we see uses a transition move. That's his move.
Yep.
The Muda lock, like that's a submission that is still used in many matches. He was ahead of his time, and I think a lot of the stuff we see in wrestling was based off of him. And and on Shot Nostalgia, we were talking about Antonio Inoki a lot because he keeps coming up in the mid '90s about his influence on wrestling. And Dave Meltzer had said that Antonio Inoki was the most influential person in the history of wrestling. And Mike and I kind of raised our eyebrows at it, but I think we're retraining our thinking because you've been thought that wrestling began in 1985, like I mentioned before at WrestleMania 1, like when Vince McMahon opened the doors for MSG and said, "Come on in, everybody." That's when wrestling began, but that's just not true. And the contributions that did happen outside of those walls do count. And Great Muta is a great example of it, where even if you didn't get to watch it live, even before your time, I mean, Great Muta debuted 5 years before I was born. You could still go back and appreciate the things he did. Those matches with Sting, those matches with Ric Flair, and also go back to look at the NWO Japan, how influential that was as well. At the fact that they had that, and yeah, it was a spin-off and offshoot. Being there, you can make the argument that the NWO first started in Japan, but that's neither here nor there. That Eric Bischoff stole the idea. But
Yeah.
either way, the NWO Japan thing was so popular that bridged the gap from American to Japanese fans, and it created these inroads for people to enjoy wrestling of all different types. So, Great Muta, he's being honored all over the place, getting his flowers with the final farewell matches. He had the farewell match as the Great Muta. He had the final farewell match as KG Muto. I mean, he tore his ACL or something, and he wrestled with it for his last match. Guy's a warrior by all accounts of the word, and well deserved. I mean, just because it didn't happen in WWF doesn't mean it didn't happen. So, huge fan of this.
Yeah. We got to bring up the kind of the saying in wrestling, the Muta scale, because I think
Yeah.
this is such a cool little thing that kind of came from the Great Muta. The Muta scale, kind of a saying to determine how much blood a wrestler has shed during a match. And this was inspired by one of the bloodiest matches in wrestling history, Muta versus Hiroshi Haas in 1992. It's something a lot of fans today probably haven't heard, the Muta scale, but that's a big thing within the wrestling community.
Yeah, and good thing for WWF honoring the past and paying homage to things that came before. And I think a lot of that credit goes to a guy like Triple H, like the fact that he has a large say what goes on. He's very aware of wrestling history and opening the doors. Go back to reigniting the relationship with Bruno Sammartino. That was Triple H's doing. I mean, grudges be damned. Get these guys in the Hall of Fame, whether it's physical or not. These guys deserve to be honored. And this place should be a physical spot. Open up a spot in Connecticut or New York City, where all this stuff, boots and ring aprons, like that warehouse that exists, that should be on display, not just at Access. It should be a physical place that people can go. If you want to do Access, pull things from just like an exhibit that you do a one-off in a museum, pull it from the actual Hall of Fame where people can visit. And it's a consistent revenue stream all year round, even in the downswings of the fall after WrestleMania is done, things for people to do following this.
Yeah, Triple H is good about, we definitely need a physical Hall of Fame, and Triple H is great about kind of honoring the legacy of pro wrestling. I mean, he has stated as a kid he was an NWA guy more than a WWE. He grew up watching these guys, and just Muta. Another thing, he was the acting president of All Japan for a long time in the 2000s, and I just find it so fascinating. If you really look at Muta, kid starts in '84. You had Inoki kind of bringing him in. Matsuda, these great legendary names. And then the guy goes to Puerto Rico. We all know the allure of wrestling in Puerto Rico, how crazy that shit can
The
be.
Cologne family's running shop there.
Exactly. Then he goes to world class, renowned territory, Von Erich's Freebirds, all of that, and feuds with a young Kerry Von Erich prior to him going to be Texas Tornado. Then he's like, you know what? I'm going to go to this NWA WCW, and he's feuding with arguably one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair, arguably one of the great up and comers of that time in Sting. And then he even gets his hands into the NWO in New Japan with Sonny and Eric's little feud between WCW and I believe he came back and tagged with Vampiro in WCW in 2000.
Yeah.
So he's really been over that in Noah recently, kind of running the booking over there.
We saw him in AEW too. Like that was another awesome moment that a lot of he got a huge pop for not ever stepping foot in an AEW ring. Just shows the transcendence of his character and his existence that people, he got a huge reaction that night when he showed up in that House of Black match.
That's a thing, man, that I'm just such a fan of the history of this shit. Not just, I always relate it to music. You've got those people, they turn on the radio, they want the top 40 hits, and there's no digging back in the record catalog and I've always been a fan of honoring what came before and really giving some reverence to what brought us to where we are right now. And Muta is such an important part of where we are right now. You always, the very cliche thing in wrestling, you always hear people say, give them their flowers. But it's very true, man. Muta deserves to be talked about. And this could easily have went by the wayside and WWE not step up and do this. And hats off to them for honoring him.
100% agree with you. And I think the best thing that we're seeing in society is this understanding of giving people their just due while they're here. Too many times we wait until they're gone to sing their praises, eulogize them in a very appropriate way. I'm so glad that Great Muta is able to see this and see how his career in ring work and out of ring work has affected the fans that have come long after he's been, not the run in 1992, 1991. Like this speaks everything about how wrestling can really elapse time and have people just appreciate things in time capsules. So love it. Absolutely deserving. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring out for this Hall of Fame speech or ceremony, whatever they're going to do for him.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to see Flair induct. I think Flair's inducting him, right?
I believe so. I mean, I would imagine I don't think they said it officially, but the fact he announced it on the bump, they're historic. I mean, that is the guy American audiences have seen him wrestle. They can't have access to Sting. Who else could they do?
If it's not, I think the perfect scenario would probably be Sting, but you're not getting Sting, so Flair's the next best option.
I agree with you. But with that being said, let's move to someone who has yet to have a WWE run, but it's been teased for a very long time. For his Hall of Fame induction has to be put off because he has yet to enter. Maybe if they have a celebrity wing eventually. But we have Conor McGregor teasing a WWE run, and we have a tweet from Ariel Helwani posting a photo with Conor McGregor this week, and he was shown, obviously, Conor, you can see in the hand for those watching on video, but those not, he's holding a Money in the Bank briefcase, and Helwani tweeted, next stop, ... Mania. And what do you think about this? I mean, you are a resident UFC expert fan whom I lean on for the information because I've just seen the one-offs of Conor McGregor, his personality. He's the advocate for his own whiskey, all that stuff. That's the guy I know. He is pro wrestling personified, like in a lot of ways with these press conferences. But do you think he has a place now that his popularity has been dwindling a bit? Because I think the height, we can all agree, was a few years ago of his popularity.
Yeah. So the tweet that you showed, I think Wyatt got a little bit of steam was WWE retweeting it with the big eye emoji eyes. But I think that's just Ariel Helwani being Ariel Helwani on that picture. Connor's always teased it, but in UFC, man, there are certain guys that always tease that shit. So this to me is much ado about nothing. That's my gut reaction. Is it out of the realm of possibility to bring him in? No, I think they could easily try and get him involved, but I don't know, man. I think Conor is always a guy. He's one of the great self promoters. He's a Floyd Mayweather. They worked with Floyd, so I guess it's possible with Conor, but um, he's always pushing. I mean, the guy has the whiskey line, Proper 12, I believe, and
Yep.
he also has his own pub in Dublin called the Black Lodge Inn, and it's a pretty renowned. It's got a lot of steam behind it in that area. Pretty fancy, pretty nice little spot. But Connor's just, I think he's just playing the game. He This is leverage. He's like from that Brock Lesnar school. He might say something like this, but I would be shocked if a Dana White loses a cash cow like Conor McGregor to a WWE. They're not going to allow him to, unless it's just an appearance type of deal where he's not actually getting involved. Dana White is not going to let him go do this. I think they've even stated that the boxing fiasco when Conor went and fought Floyd Mayweather, it was good for business from a one-time monetary standpoint, but it really threw off the booking of Conor for a while. And for Dana to allow someone like Conor to go, they're in a spot right now. UFC's in a transitional spot where they don't really have a ton of big money drawing stars. You know what I mean? Like John Jones just came back, and that's one of their big guys. So that's good for them. But the thing with Conor is Conor isn't this untouchable, not undefeated. He had 2 losses before he came to the UFC. But he was on this undefeated streak in the UFC. He was an untouchable guy, dude.
Right.
That's when he was the guy who would run his mouth off. He would hype a fight like a pro wrestler would, and then he'd go in and back his shit talk up. And that's why it just built behind this guy. But once you're starting to take L's and take losses, I think the bloom is off the rose a little bit as far as he's still popular. I don't want to hate on the guy. The dude, if he shows up in WWE, it'll be massive, massive news. But it's not what it would have been when he was the champion, when he still had that title and he was still Mr. Untouchable. It wouldn't have been as big as that. It's like Tyson. Tyson
Yeah.
didn't show up in WWE with the title, and he came in off of a lot of controversy, the prison time and all biting the
Biting the
ear.
ear. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So like with Conor, he has a lot of controversy around him too, man. There's a lot of he's got and who knows if it's people trying to make money off of him or what, but he's had a lot of like allegations from women. He's had even allegations of being tied in with like the Irish mafia.
Mm.
So there's a lot of like bad stuff that kind of hangs over him. A dark cloud hangs over him a little bit. But I think when you have the power and the money that a Conor has, that stuff tends to not stick to you. Like Floyd Mayweather, tons of domestic abuse allegations. The guy, it never takes him down. He's like the Teflon Don. So, I don't think those controversies would keep WWE from working with him, but it would be big money, man. It would be big money. I think Ariel Helwani posted that picture being what he can be sometimes, and that's a troll.
Completely agree with you. And I obviously Conor McGregor, if you look at Ronda Rousey, it took her going downhill in a slide that Conor McGregor hasn't had, because as you mentioned before, even though he's had a few losses in UFC, feels like he will deny it. You know what I mean? They can go up there and be like, fake news, I didn't lose.
Yeah, he's
You know,
the Trump of UFC.
Yeah, he figures out a way to self-promote, as you mentioned. So that's why I think he does have a place in WWE. Maybe not this year, maybe it's not going to be Mania 39, but maybe down the line. And I think eventually what happens for these UFC guys after they're done, once you're not physically able to fight anymore, you want to keep the legend alive. What better place in WWE where you can guarantee and have this script to follow where you can still look good despite your athleticism wasn't being what it used to be, Do I see him having a full lengthy run like Ronda Rousey? No. I could definitely see him stepping foot between those ropes as a wrestler, just looking at it from the outside, looking in as far as not being a UFC guy. I just think it makes a lot of sense for his team because he could do this 5 years from now and be able to show up, do the whole thing, and it bridges the gap between UFC and WWE fans. And UFC fans might scoff at it, but at the end of the day, they're going to tune in if he's there. That's the other part. And he has his own legion of fandom that isn't just UFC. They're just people that follow him too. So when you watch that Floyd Mayweather fight, there are people that were just Conor fans. Doesn't matter what he's doing, whether it be in UFC or WWE. I think people will follow him. And as you mentioned, going back to the self-promotion, having the ability to get up there on his social media, which is millions of people, and have the ability to promote the things he wants to promote. And it's a very great reciprocal relationship between WWE and Conor McGregor if they can get the right number and come to agreement. Because at the end of the day, he can't win if he's going to wrestle a guy like Roman Reigns, who was teased here. I mean, we didn't mention that, but Paul Heyman did respond to the tweet saying that Conor would get smashed just like anyone who dares to oppose the tribal chief. McGregor hasn't responded yet, but if he does respond, that has me believing that there might be some fire here. I don't know. I mean, Roman versus Conor, even with the title not involved, I think has a lot of pay-per-view potential. So, and that's WWE in a nutshell, man. Like, they don't care. It's these one-off things. Like the Logan Paul match just exists on an island and doesn't have to make sense storyline-wise, which is hilarious because everyone is giving shit to the Vikingo and the Omega match happening on Dynamite, not realizing, guess what, guys? They hyped it December 2021, and Kenny couldn't be there to, excuse me, wrestle for the AAA Championship, the Mega Championship, and it just didn't happen. There is a fucking story. Just because you didn't see it or read it or do your own research, I'm sorry, it existed. So do your own research. Just because Mike Tenay is not spoon feeding you like they did in 1996 WCW doesn't mean that you can't go out there and Google who is Vikingo. Just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not important to wrestling.
No, there's a big narrative out there from fans that if it doesn't happen on my TV, how am I supposed to know the story? And I get that. I get the people that don't want to dive deep. I get that we should be able to track these stories just by sitting down for 2 hours. I get that philosophy, but that's not AEW philosophy. They're doing a lot of things that are deep cuts. And is it hurting them and maybe confusing some of the casuals that tune into AEW? Yeah, but I think they've proven that they book for the hardcores, and you can't shit on how they're doing it when the hardcores are loving it and tuning in. Is it stunting maybe their growth a little bit? Sure, but if they didn't want to do it like that and they wanted to spoon feed you, they would. So obviously they're okay doing things like this. But just back to Conor and the Roman Reigns thing, like, I just don't see something like that being possible. And here's why. Like, Conor is a little guy. I know he's a badass. I mean, he would probably go in and steamroll Roman Reigns in a real fight. The guy has fucking hands of stone, like, and he can throw some leather. But Roman is a big boy, and Conor fights traditionally at lightweight, which is 155. Now that's cutting down to lightweight, and I think he's teased maybe he fought, I believe, once or twice at welterweight, which is 170. So he's probably walking around at about 170 to 180 pounds, I would say. He is looking a little more beefy, but he's a short, littler guy. He's a lightweight guy. You get a standoff with him and Roman, it's going to look ridiculous. I'm not going to buy that Conor can win. And I know everyone, they're probably screaming, yeah, but they did it with Floyd. The difference with Floyd was they put him in there with Big Show. And Floyd ended up getting one over on him. It was like the David and Goliath thing. You know, Floyd ended up getting over on Big Show. Here, you're not going to want Conor to get over on Roman Reigns. So it's kind of a different booking philosophy. And the same thing with Tyson. You can't really relate it to Tyson either, because when Tyson came in, when Tyson was nose to nose with Stone Cold, they looked like equals. You were talking about a heavyweight champion. You're not talking about a lightweight champion or a welterweight champion. Tyson looked very equivalent to a Stone Cold or a Shawn Michaels. Conor and Roman, man, it's going to be like total size difference. I don't know. I don't buy that anything would come from that. I don't know how they would book Conor to come in because, you know, they had Tyson Fury come in and do his little one off. Tyson Fury's a monster. He looks like a WWE performer. He's big.
Right.
Conor isn't a big guy.
No, I mean, it's an interesting point for sure. Cause like obviously with Conor, his size be damned, he's able to go in the ring and tap guys out. Maybe they do the angle where like he'd be a guy to put it, if he can put Roman in an armbar like they did with Logan, like one punch. But you said Logan Paul was deceptively big in that feud with Roman. So,
And Conor's known for his power. He's known
right.
for his stand up, his punching. He's not a submission guy. So
Mm.
it's like that's where it gets a little look, WWE could get him in there, and I'm sure they would find a way to make it work with his size and all of that. In the back of my mind, I was secretly hoping that Tony Khan, personal friends with Dana White, I was hoping
Mm.
Tony Khan was going to grease the palms real heavy and get Conor to come in and be their version of Mike Tyson to bring eyes onto their product because
Now
Conor
you're talking.
McGregor,
Now you're talking.
yeah, Conor McGregor staring down a Orange Cassidy or someone like that, I feel like there's a lot more money on the table as far as me buying in to him standing across the ring from some of AEW's guys. Cause you know, the big critique with a lot of people is like AEW has smaller guys. I think it would work in their favor with a Conor McGregor more than WWE and Conor McGregor.
Very good point. Before we move on, I can actually just picture it in my brain, recreating the WrestleMania 14 scenario with different characters, but special enforcer Conor McGregor getting his shine and then getting his moment. And, you know, the Tyson thing lives forever. And Mike and I on Sean Nostalgia spoke about it. Tyson never took a bump. Like, you know what I mean? Like
No,
Tyson's
yeah.
in there. He looks like a champ punching out Shawn Michaels at the end of WrestleMania 14. Maybe you have something like that. And it would be this nice, we talk about all the time, these love letters to wrestling. It might be Tony Khan's love letter to the Attitude Era. I think it writes itself. So I think we just booked the angle. I would love it. Just, you know, as
Yeah.
far as the money goes, we can't handle that. So Tony, grease the palms, as Chad said. But,
yeah.
you ready to move to quick hitters?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, quick hitters here. And we're going to start with, could have been one of the big three stories, but wasn't. That's what we always say here on here. And that's why they lead with the quick hitters. It's Rhea Ripley and Charlotte potentially main eventing the first night of WrestleMania for quote unquote political reasons. There's been a lot of fan backlash, conversation about it being, or it should be, Sammy and KO versus the Usos for the tag titles. How do you feel about this? I mean, there was conversation about this would be the consolation prize for Sami Zayn not being able to win the title and have this momentum pay off. I think the no-brainer is the tag titles, but I see why they would want the women's world title to main event the show because it is another equivalent world title. But what do you think about this?
Well, I think that's the political reason. It's like, well, we need to put our female world title in that main event slot and kind of equality reigning supreme. But to me, in pro wrestling, true equality is what's your biggest story. And
yeah,
the biggest story to main event night one is Sammy and the Usos. You know, Sammy KO and the Usos. That's the Bloodline should headline both nights because that's been your money making storyline. I'm not a huge fan of this Sammy and KO versus Usos. I feel like it's kind of been the long way to get to where the way they booked it. I just haven't been a fan of this. But the Bloodline storyline in general has been great, but I do think everyone's in on it. Everyone loves it. And that is the no-brainer main event for night one to me is anything with Sami Zayn should be the main event.
So the culmination of the Bloodline storyline might just happen at WrestleMania 39 with Roman Reigns being defeated by Cody Rhodes finally. And one of the first feuds people have a conversation about, dream match with the history there, is Randy Orton. So a new report from the PW Insider talks about Orton being ready to, and obviously we have no idea what's going to be planned for him, but a heel Orton versus a babyface Cody Rhodes for the championship would be the perfect transition into Cody's run. They have a history, obviously, with the legacy and all the things that went on with them. We haven't seen Orton since he and Riddle lost the tag team titles to the aforementioned Usos on May 20th, 2022. He's been hurt, but he is a guy they sorely miss, and he's the consummate professional that would be a perfect opponent for Cody Rhodes at these Backlash pay-per-views, potentially going into the summer.
Yeah, Randy Orton is Mr. Backlash. If you
true.
listen to Raw Down, dude, I would love this feud. This is the feud I'm wanting. So much history there. You know what was the crew they were in?
The Legacy, Ted DiBiase Jr. You had the really
it would be great, man. There's even that when Orton was the legend killer, him disrespecting Dusty in a backstage segment with Cody. I mean, there's a lot there for them to dive into, and I think they're pretty close as far as their buddies. Orton kind of showed Cody the ropes early on, being that second, third generation type of wrestler. I think their chemistry would be off the charts. I'm here for that feud.
100%. And we also had some troubling news pop up this weekend with Davey Richards, and we have multiple promotions cutting ties with him. So the Team Ambition Wrestling Academy out of St. Louis, where he works, said they are formally and permanently parting ways with the 40-year-old. So they are saying that some of these allegations for domestic violence are out there with Davey Richards. We're not going to sit there and talk about them. We're going to talk about the fallout. The St. Louis Anarchy promotion announced yesterday that Richards was no longer scheduled for its show on April 14th. Richards tried to get ahead of this by saying he's retiring, which came out of left field because he's been active on the indies and he's been looking to be rebooked in some of the bigger promotions. And Davey Richards, we could talk about his resume and what he's accomplished. This sucks, man. When you hear things pop out like this, and whether it's true or not, it's definitely damaging to his reputation, and to the point where promotions want nothing to do with it. And we see independents don't really have the wherewithal to say we'll still book them, because they, like, at the end of the day, it could crush someone like St. Louis Anarchy. Like, that could crush their promotion. So they immediately cut ties, and we're saying goodbye to Davey Richards, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in American Wolves, he was just the champ over in MLW, dropped the title to John Morrison. When I see allegations come out against someone and no one knows the truth, no one knows the truth, but as soon as an allegation comes out and your first initial instinct is to just retire and quit the business, that makes me think there's a little bit of something there. Because if you're dead set that you are innocent, I feel like, I know in today's day and age, a lot of times if you say anything, you're damned. It's going to look bad either way. But if you just kind of tuck your tail and run, man, that doesn't bode well for the way I feel when someone gets allegations against them. But it's a shame, man, because I am a big Davey Richards fan. I love Eddie Edwards, that tag team. I just saw last year, me and Sneed got to see FTR against the American Wolves in like a 25-minute barn burner classic. I mean, they tore the house down. I honestly thought Davey Richards, there was a possibility with him leaving MLW. I thought he might pop up in ROH. Like,
Yeah.
it was a big possibility. Former champion, I believe.
Yep.
But with all of this, there's a lot of guys, careers are cut short. You look at the Joey Ryans. You look at the villain,
Marty Skrull, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe he gets thrown into that group of guys. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and if the allegations are true, well deserved. You know what I mean? Like, if they are true. So
yeah, they're true. Fuck him. Like,
yeah,
buddy. Like.
Yep. So we have the next two quick hitters are kind of tied together. But first there's a rumor from the Wrestling Observer notes in the newsletter from this week, which we'll of course get to in Dave's raves, but the New Day potentially returning to TV as a unit. So there's been talk about Big E making his WWE return at WrestleMania 39. And the idea is that Big E, Kofi, Xavier Woods would come out together to their entrance, get their pop. But I mean, this past weekend that just passed is a 1-year anniversary of Big E breaking his neck on SmackDown, which is crazy to think about. He's set to undergo tests around this point to see if he's able to come back to the ring. We're not sure. But paired with this, putting question into whether they're going to have the New Day entrance, is Kofi Kingston just had surgery with the injury to his right ankle on March 3rd during the segment with LA Knight, Karrion Kross, Sheamus, and Drew McIntyre. So now, I mean, this is kind of the end of an era a little bit. Like, I'm not saying this is career ending for Kofi Kingston, but with Big E's future in question and Kofi Kingston has a lot of miles on that body and the rehab for an injured ankle to the point where he needs surgery, it's daunting. I'm not saying he's not going to do it, but we may see the end of New Day as an era for this, one of the best trios in wrestling history.
Yeah. Kofi's long in the tooth anyways, and to be taking injuries, like that, an ankle injury when you're a high flyer, not to say it's going to stop his career or anything, but it definitely, those little things that late in your career affect your style. They slow you down a little, at least a little bit. And, I was a Big E fan, and big bummer when he got hurt. It is crazy to think that this could be the end of the New Day. I have mixed feelings about New Day because I think they're one of the most successful trios ever. I think they're one of the greatest tag team combos ever. But I do think they kind of squeezed that gimmick for every bit of juice. And I always found myself in maybe the last couple years wanting some major development with them. I'm not saying they have to turn against each other, but I always felt like they were just kind of on cruise control in the last few years. You had Kofi Mania, Big E had his title win, which was absolutely forgettable. I
Xavier
always
won King of the Ring too.
Yeah, like they had big things, but it was never like as talented as those guys were, as charismatic as they were. I always thought that creative could have given them something big and monumental to really let us sink our teeth into some story with them. But they were so popular at what they did. It was kind of that John Cena effect where once you get that popular, especially with kids and merch, booking becomes, the bookers get afraid of change. And I think sometimes when a booker gets afraid of change, it hurts truly compelling stories from entering into your atmosphere. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I agree with you.
like they're great. I'm not hating on them, but I just wonder if they weren't saddled with that just over the over popularity of them and the merch and all of this, if they weren't saddled with like the responsibility of that, could they have been booked in way more compelling storylines?
So you mentioned John Cena being on cruise control, but he's been in that legend role, the same role that The Rock was in when he was feuding with The Rock. So it's interesting to see him here. And we got a rumor potentially we're going to get John Cena and Logan Paul at SummerSlam 2023. You guys remember SummerSlam's at a stadium. It's at Ford Field in Detroit. A lot of seats to fill. So they're trying to put as much celebrity in there as possible. We're getting Cena versus Austin Theory at WrestleMania. Maybe we're going to get Cena versus Paul at this WrestleMania, but it didn't come to fruition. I mean, at this point, Cena's busy schedule would determine if he can make it back into SummerSlam to be there for meaningful story. At this point, both these guys, they're huge celebrities in different ways. I mean, Cena, obviously, a lot of his stuff was in the ring, but he's becoming outside of the ring celebrity. I don't think he's reached levels that The Rock eventually reached, but he's getting the acting roles. He's on the radar of the casual fan, and sometimes not even wrestling fans, which is saying a lot for the wrestling industry. But, Ringside News reported that Cena versus Paul was penciled in for WrestleMania 39 at one point, and it was no longer being discussed for the card. Obviously, we have Cena and Theory settled and Logan Paul and Seth Rollins settled. But a WWE source responded to the match possibly happening at SummerSlam and said, nothing has been discussed yet, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think they want this match while Cena is willing to be active. I think they see money in the promos, the build up to everything going into it. And I think the match could deliver. And this would be huge for a buy rate, views, if you want to look at it that way. And then the attendance, like you have to sell seats on August 5th. a lot of seats. And the WWE brand does a lot just bringing people in, but you got to attract people with an attraction. You can bring in people outside with Logan Paul and a John Cena. So yeah, we'll see what happens with this.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly they were both in love with the idea to work together. So like, uh, it seems like a match that would work. Cena's kind of, I hate to say it, he's a part timer. You know, he's a legend, but it makes sense. Logan's kind of, he's not an every week guy either. He kind of pops up for the big events. Um, I think they would put on a great match. It's definitely marquee. I would love to see Cena just run him down in a promo burial like he just did on Theory. But man, that Logan Paul, dude, I don't know what that guy did. And he's great in the ring. He's very impressive, but he's getting like the Kurt Angle treatment, dude.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, getting these big Rollins, Roman, Cena. They're really opening the doors for this kid. Hopefully this isn't a kind of a summer fling for
Right.
Logan and that he sees himself in the WWE for a while. Cause if Logan Paul truly falls in love with the WWE and he has like, say, a decade run and these are the matches he's getting, this kid could be a big deal for this company. I'm always just hesitant with any celebrity entering in because I'm like, are you really here or are you going to leave soon? You know, so it keeps me from really locking in on him. But dude, Logan in the ring, kid's talented.
Yeah, and we spoke about time flying, and Tuesday of this past week marked the 1 year anniversary since Hall of Famer Scott Hall passed away at the age of 63. Can't believe it's been 1 year when it popped up, but popping in the news obviously was people paying tribute, but was the from Kevin Nash, Sean Waltman posting the picture on Scott Hall's grave where they had all the roses paying tribute to the existing alive members of the clique. Uh, really spoke to me about brotherhood and friendship, and you think about the people that are ride or die, not just in wrestling obviously, but in your own lives, where of these people that support you, and the ramifications of him passing away at 63, it's still rippling through, and you see how effective their friendship was to keeping the wrestling industry in their lives. Like Shawn and Triple H and Shawn Michaels, like even the relationship Scott Hall had with DDP, like you could still see it resonate with them that they're still heartbroken he's gone, and all the roads they traveled together, all the memories that they have. It's got to be tough. I mean, Cassidy, his daughter, put a rose on the grave for each of them, and the picture just, I mean, didn't even need a caption. It just was like it took your breath away a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, losing Scott Hall's sucked. I couldn't believe it was a year either. It seems like just last week, Raw Down was doing that tribute show for Scott Hall, and I like what you said about brotherhood and how these guys really ride or die for each other, and that's very cool to see them rallying around each other and showing how close they were. And Scott Hall really seems like he was one of the kind of the glue of the group. Like everyone just heralded that guy. And I think Kevin Nash posted something on social media, a picture of Scott Hall, and he said, if AI created the perfect pro wrestler, it would be this guy. And Scott Hall, he did look like just the quintessential pro wrestler, but it's been said so much, but it's so true. The guy never gets the respect from the casual fan base of how smart he was for pro wrestling. Just a great mind for the business. Crazy that it's been a year, man.
Yeah, so go out and watch a Scott Hall match today. Do yourself a favor and pick one. They're all good. So we have about the announcement, and he said that he and Michael Cole will be the team on commentary for the foreseeable future, alluding to this was in an interview with the Daily Star. He said that McAfee will always remain a friend of WWE, but he's too busy with outside projects to resume his role. So we saw McAfee come back a few months ago to a huge reaction. I think it was at the Rumble. It was at the Rumble, I believe. But McAfee has a lot on his plate. Obviously, he does his own show on a daily basis. He has a relationship with college football. He's highly tied to other outside projects. I'd like to see him come back. I mean, I thought he brought a boost into the announce booth that we haven't seen in a very long time. And I personally love McAfee's style. He marches the beat of his own. He's an acquired taste for sure. People don't have the same affinity for him that they have for longtime voices of wrestling, King Lawler, but he brings his own flair, man. Like, I love what he brought to the product, and I hope he comes back very soon.
Yeah, the thing I love Pat McAfee. I think he brings a unique energy, like you said. I think one of the great byproducts of Pat McAfee being a part of that group is he really brought something new out of Michael Cole. I'm not a Michael Cole fan, but Michael Cole with Pat McAfee, I thought he elevated him and brought some personality out of him. And Pat, to his credit, Pat McAfee, I think in response to stuff like this with Wade Barrett chiming in on this, Pat McAfee came out and said, I am not done with WWE. One of my goals is to make it into the WWE Hall of Fame, and I still plan to do that. He's just tied up with, everything he has going on. I think we're going to see Pat McAfee back in some form or fashion, but who knows when. So
we saw someone else return in AEW in their land and got a huge pop in Canada. Stu Grayson is All Elite again. And he made his return in the promotion at last night's Wednesday's Dynamite in Winnipeg. He reunited with the Dark Order. Back in the fold. The reason why he left in May 2022 wasn't personal. It was just the contract expiring, and they failed to agree on a new one. Stu Grayson explored elsewhere. Tony Khan was unwilling to give him probably what he wanted, but I think the value of Stu Grayson was apparent on this Dynamite. He is the glue really that holds the Dark Order together and brings out a side of Evil Uno that is drastically different when he's with him. And I don't think it's a coincidence to see Evil Uno kind of finding that rhythm when Stu Grayson's by his side. You know, the history of the Super Smash Brothers and being a legendary tag team on the independents, like it's huge. And Stu Grayson doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I'm happy to see him back with AEW.
I'm stoked he's back. When that match happened, I was like, Tony's going to open the checkbook and get this guy back in. Like, I just had this feeling because the crowd, I know he's in Canada. It was not a hometown show, but a home country show for him.
Right.
Dude crushed it. And I am a massive fan of the OG Dark Order, Stu and Evil Uno. I never felt like they truly got their push in a tag team run. Like, they put on some great matches, but I hope with Stu coming back, him and Evil Uno tear it up in the tag division and really bring some interesting matchups, because go back and watch some of those 2019, 2020 Dark Order matches with Stu and Evil Uno taking on guys, because dude, their matches with the Young Bucks in PWG when they were Super Smash Brothers, next level shit. Like, they're highly entertaining. I'm happy to have Stu back.
So speaking of Dynamite from Winnipeg, we also had Saraya getting legitimately fined for a line she delivered during a promo in that entry into the Outcast having their name. Saraya, Ruby Soho, Tony Storm are in the ring for cutting a pretty much heel promo, but Saraya was really feeling herself because she was calling out all the, I quote, neck beards. I don't know if Turnbuckle Tavern will find me. You're the man who writes the check, so I don't know if we could say it, but
say it.
All right. Well, I mean, she doesn't expect, and I quote, anything less from a bunch of neckbeard stinky twats. And then she gave a middle finger. So there's a Twitter exchange. Obviously, they're on a national network saying that word is not really conducive to getting the network executives happy.
Is twat that bad?
I mean, from where she is, that is a very common word that's being used, that's passed around. You know, that it's a cultural thing, but she knew what she was doing.
I mean, she could have used the other very loosely thrown around British slang for the same thing she was talking about, and she didn't. I never thought twat was that bad. I didn't. I was kind of shocked that she got fined for that, but it is what it is. I mean, she could have dropped the "see you next Tuesday," if you get what I'm saying.
No, for sure. And then, so the proceeds went to AEW Together projects. Saraya apologized privately, and then it resulted in a mass email sent out to AEW talent saying that she was fined for profanity, and the use of the middle finger needs to be approved with BJ Whitmer prior to them using it, which is interesting. I guess MJF has a a pre-existing agreement every time he's out there to be like, all right, I got 3 middle fingers. Check, check, check. You did 4, by the way. So give us the money to AEW together. But
Jericho throws them pretty liberally too.
Saraya getting legit heat, though. I was a fan of this promo. Honestly, I didn't even catch that line. I just remember just being like, she got a lot of boos, and Saraya was saying that people were squaring up in their seats to fight her. And she said the reply to it was, they were not happy. I loved it. Worth the fine. So maybe down the line to look at this and be like, it was much ado about nothing. But if it means meaningful heat that she's going to be getting, I think, like we said, it's worth it. You get that merchandise back.
That Saraya quote, they were not happy. I loved it. Worth the fine. That's what it's all about. When Tony fined her, I guarantee you it was with a smile on his face and saying, man, pick your favorite charity. That was a good job. I mean, like, that's not, I don't think that's any type of she's in trouble with this is placating your broadcast partners.
For sure.
That's all it is. All the boys in the back are like, man, good job. I love that segment. I think that segment to me kind of signified, hey, they're starting to put a little heat behind this storyline. I enjoyed it.
So we also had the Hall of Fame. We talked about Great Muta being inducted, Rey Mysterio, potentially Stacy Keibler down the line, but Batista was originally supposed to be inducted in 2020. The pandemic forced the delay. Both sides agreed to induct him in the near future. People were saying probably this year, but apparently it's not going to be happening because he's going to be filming the My Spy sequel in South Africa, and he can't be there in person. So, I mean, it would have been interesting to have him and longtime friend Rey Mysterio going in together. Their history speaks for itself. I don't know. The Hall of Fame feels a little lackluster this year, aside from the Great Muta at the top of the class, and Rey Mysterio, which is for storyline purposes. I feel like the only reason Rey's going on to ignite even further this powder keg, that's that Dominic feud. I don't know. I mean, the other conversation people are having was a celebrity wing, legacy wing inductees going down, or like maybe the Warrior Award being expanded. It's a very small group at this point, 2022. I mean, 2023, but 2022 was 5 people as well. Taker, Vader, Queen Sharmell, the Steiner brothers, Shad Gaspard with the Warrior Award. So it's not unlike them to only go with 5. They just did it last year.
Yeah, I'll be honest, man. Like, it is shocking that Batista isn't going, with him being such a player in Hollywood right now with the Guardians of the Galaxy and all the stuff he's doing. I thought he would be kind of the quintessential guy for a Hollywood Mania, but Hall of Fame in recent years has just been like forgettable to me. Not to hate on anyone who's been inducted in the last few years, but once they started attaching it to SmackDown and it's in the ring instead of like on a stage with everyone in tuxedos and the podium, like, it's lost some of the specialness. It doesn't feel as special, for lack of a better word. Like, it doesn't feel as momentous to me.
Mm.
When you're just coming down into a ring instead of the Hall of Fame used to feel like the Academy Awards, the Grammys, the Emmys, the Golden Globe. It had a award show vibe, and now it just feels like a segment on a wrestling show, and I hate that.
So speaking on wrestling shows, people do get hurt, and Danhausen came out a sling on Dynamite. It's apparent that he tore his pec at Revolution, so he'll be out of action for a long period of time. Using Cody Rhodes as a barometer, he needed about 6 months to get right. So it looks like Danhausen won't be involved in in-ring action. Not that it really matters. I feel like his antics are ringside either way.
Yeah, he's still going to be around. He's still going to be. I don't think it's going to affect his on-screen stuff. It kind of a bummer because he was starting to get a little more in-ring activity, but dude, he's had a string of bad luck. I mean, before this, what was it? A broken leg?
Yep.
Like, he's been dealing with a lot of injuries.
At I think it was 2. I mean, time flies, but like 2 Comic-Cons ago, he was in like a wheelchair with being wheeled around the convention. So
yeah, when AEW signed him, he was still recovering from that. So
yeah. So we also had Brock Lesnar news, and this is, you talk about much ado about nothing. This seems like the same case here. We had after the almost segment with Lesnar, he left the Amica Mutual Pavilion in Providence, Rhode Island immediately. There was a car running in the back of the arena waiting for Lesnar to return from shooting the segment. He went straight from the car and was driven to a private plane so he could fly home in the exact same clothes, didn't get changed, didn't say bye to the boys. He was out. I didn't raise an eyebrow at this. This just seems how Lesnar does business at this point, and that's good for him. He just does his shit, gets paid, and he's out the door. This is as pro wrestling as it gets for a part-timer.
This is Brock. Like PWI, it kills me, and the way they spin it. He robbed the place. There was a car running in the parking lot. Like he robbed a guy and had, like, come on, man. Lesnar is known for get in, get out, go back home. He wants to be on the farm with the family. This is nothing to me.
So the one place that Lesnar may have been going to on the plane might have been Troy, Ohio, for these AEW House Rules shows. Unclear if he was in the building or not, but it was a dawning of the new era. It was a big step for AEW. A big crowd that they had to see the main event being Blackpool Combat Club, Jon Moxley and Claudio taking on the firm's Big Bill and Lee Moriarty, but some other good matches. Powerhouse Hobbs versus Christopher Daniels for the TNT Championship. Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin versus Butcher and the Blade. Nice reps for younger wrestlers. And you know what? It might be wearing on some of the guys like Jon Moxley, but once these things get rolling, you can start selling tickets. Maybe a guy like Moxley doesn't have to be on them anymore.
Yeah. We have a little clip just to show you the packed out crowd in Troy, Ohio. And there were multiple pictures being shared, like, man, sold out. And this is a little Troy, Ohio. They're not going to get a Dynamite probably, you know? And for the smaller markets, these house shows are just going to build the fan base. Like you said, it's going to get the young guys reps. And Dave on the Observer, when these house shows were first announced, he was like, it could be a negative, they're not money making ventures. A lot of times, like, people are eating cost, but it does help you grow. And I remember Dave being very skeptical of how the turnouts would be. He was like, people are paying to see the Kenny Omegas, the Bucks. Are they going to turn out for the low to mid card guys? And I know this is the first show, so it probably had a lot of heat behind it, and we'll see how it goes, a year from now when they're doing house shows. But as of right now, I think they kind of hit it out of the park with attendance.
Yeah, and I think if they continue to test new markets, the key is we watch with Dynamite tapings as well, or Rampage tapings and Dynamite's live. When you saturate the market, like now for Long Island, they've been to UBS a few times. There's still tickets available, but when they first came, it was a hot item ticket. So I think that's going to happen, and we might see a drop off in attendance. But like you said, it's not about the immediate making money on the show. It's about expanding the product. Maybe they'll come to a future show. Maybe they'll buy your pay-per-view. It's an investment in what you're doing. And let's just say WWF 1995 would have been very happy with the numbers that they did at Troy, Ohio. So they had an understanding about bigger picture, and I think Tony Khan does as well.
Absolutely, man. I think these shows are extremely important for a young company to kind of get your claws in a fan base and let people know, WWE, dude, a lot of times those WWE live events, those house shows, those are more entertaining for fans than Raw and SmackDown. There's a lot of downtime at a Raw and SmackDown show where you're sitting on your ass with nothing to watch. You're watching commercials on the Big Tron, where at live events, it's all about the fans. They're doing things that you might not see on a Raw or SmackDown. And you kind of alluded to something that I think is very interesting that we don't think about a lot, Ace, is like, when you think about wrestling and the towns they go to, one of the more interesting aspects that no one talks about is the strategy behind where you go. Obviously, the MSGs, the big hotbeds, Chicago, Philly, all of these places, but there is like a mathematical type of equation that you have to do where you don't want to burn out a territory. You want to go to these smaller markets. but at the same time, you're having to put the equation in your head of cost effectiveness. Like these runs they do, you don't want to be going to Seattle and then going to, Portland, Maine. You're burning your production costs, but it's a very intricate equation to do, where you're trying to find new towns, smaller towns to kind of go into, but at the same time not return to the same place over and over. Because I think that was the issue with AEW before. That's why they brought Jarrett in. I know, we always talk about Jeff Jarrett. We bring
I
him
like
up,
him in that role, by the way.
but that's why they bring him in. And since he's came in, you've seen them going into these little smaller towns that they haven't been to yet. And, I think when they went, Colton went to, I believe it was a Louisville show. That was the first time they went to Louisville. And it was shocking to me. Like, how have you not been to Louisville yet? But I'm just always fascinated by the way you lay out your tour. Like, where are you going? When are you going? When are you coming back? Because I know here in Charleston, we've got 2 Dynamites. We got the 5th Dynamite ever in 2019, and then they came back last year. So, for markets like us, it probably makes sense about every 2 to 3 years. But I think markets like they do really well in Texas and some of the big northeastern cities, you can return a little sooner. But I'm always fascinated by that stuff.
Absolutely. And maybe at one of these house shows, we'll see the return of a legendary figure in wrestling, Paul White. So he's been teasing his in-ring return. Getting back in the ring is something he wants to do. He named some opponents that he has in mind, specifically Kenny Omega, which is an interesting dynamic. Darby Allin, Wardlow, Lance Archer, of course, Satnam Singh, and Powerhouse Hobbs. Yeah, I mean, I know that Paul White, probably the worst booked guy at the end of his WWE career, like truly, for a guy who could be an attraction. His beginning run, 1999, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, to probably around 01, before they started giving the Mark Henry treatment, sending him back to OVW to go lose some weight. And then resurgence in 2003, being managed by Paul Heyman. He's had some huge moments, not to mention what he's done in WCW, the youngest world champion in company history. He, obviously 20 something years old, getting the rub and beating Hulk Hogan and all that stuff. And yeah, so if he wants to get back in the ring, he feels like he's able to do it. Why not? As long as it's not in lieu of the younger talent. The same criticism I have for Jeff Jarrett, I'd have for Paul White. It needs to be done correctly. And if he's going to put over a guy like Satnam Singh, maybe he wants to give back to the business to create the next generation of bigger, larger than life characters.
Yeah. From what I've heard him say in interviews, was it a hip surgery or a knee surgery? Something where they've built him into the new bionic man, medically. And he said that he feels so much greater, and that he was in a lot of pain in those late matches that he had before he kind of hung it up for a while. Him and Kenny Omega would be fun.
Yeah.
That's a different type of thing. I don't know how they would do it. I know they even I want to say they put a trademark on
Captain Insano from the Waterboy.
Captain Insano and Jericho. So I don't know if he's going to link up with Jericho at some point. I know Jericho said that's his favorite tag team partner he ever had, but I'm with you. Like,
fuck yeah, just put him in there.
Put him in JS.
Why not?
He's a very entertaining performer. He was, like you said, used awful in WWE. He was flip-flopped so many times. But if done correctly, I have no problem with veterans. That's the beauty of pro wrestling to me, is watching younger talent mix with older talent and doing it the right way. I think young talent needs that a lot of times. If it's just young guys going against young guys and they're never brushing up with veterans, you're not going to pass down the tradition of the business as much as you should.
How much you want to bet that Darby Allin's in the back rallying to have that exact same stretcher spot where Rey Mysterio was tied to the stretcher in like 2004, 2003. He wants to be tied to stretcher, and he says, "You know what, Paul? I want you to swing me against the ring post as hard as you can, and do it twice, because I know you did to Rey once. I want it twice." But moments like that, you know what I'm saying?
Dude, I would love a coffin match between Darby and Big Show. Come on.
Yeah, call him El Gigante, whatever you want to call him, because
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so we have, speaking of AEW wrestlers, they are reportedly working without non-compete clauses in their contract. So we reported this on one of the original episodes of Wrestling Tonight about this new rule proposed by the U.S. government, which would pretty much do away with non-compete clauses and how it would affect wrestling specifically. But in a new report from Fightful a few weeks ago, they said that the proposed FTC rule may not affect AEW at all. That being said, it's being noted, and obviously it's all conjecture, and we don't have the documents in front of us, that there are no non-compete clauses attached to many of the contracts in AEW. The clauses right now are just standard in WWE, so we assumed it'd be standard in AEW, with main roster non-competes lasting for 90 days, and obviously the non-competes for NXT are just 30, and it appears right now AEW has none at all. So when asked about AEW's lack of non-competes, a source noted that the company generally doesn't release talent unless there's a special request or disciplinary action, so they necessarily don't have to have them. So interestingly enough, we have situations obviously with CM Punk. AEW sources believe that if Punk were to be released from his deal early, it would be in condition he's not to compete in WWE for a period of time. It feels like it is one of those things that it's a one-off in each situation's base. Obviously, William Regal's another idea as well. The conditional release keeps Regal off TV until January 2024. They negotiated in the moment instead of being a standard. So it's a different progressive approach that Tony Khan and the team has there.
I think it's a better approach. I mean, why you don't need, we see the way AEW handles their quote unquote releases. They just let your contract run out. They're not, very rarely have they cut people early. I think back to Jimmy Havoc. I think they released him early.
Yep.
And with Regal, like you said, before they gave him that conditional release, they probably set terms of like, okay, we'll grant this release, but you X, Y, and Z has to be followed. Same thing if they would release Punk, they wouldn't want him turning up on Monday Night Raw the next week. But I think the way they handle contracts is, instead of putting out these blanket stipulations and contracts, I think it's way more fitting to handle everything case by case.
And paired with the progressive nature of Tony Khan, he's brought in guys from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Most notably this summer, we saw Will Ospreay. Unfortunately, Will Ospreay suffered a right shoulder injury in his March 13th New Japan Cup match with Mark Davis. He's out of the tournament, precautionary, so we don't have details about the extent of the injury. New Japan confirmed it, saying the next day he won't be in the show in Okayama, and next day, obviously, Davis is going to just replace him in the tournament. Bigger picture, we have WrestleMania weekend coming up. He's wrestling Speedball Mike Bailey. What's going to happen with Forbidden Door? Is this shoulder thing going to hold him out? Hopefully it's just a tweak and they're just being, treating with kid gloves right now. Will Ospreay is very important to what AEW wants to do with Forbidden Door, because that's right now the biggest star in New Japan Pro Wrestling, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's there. He's kind of taken the reins from Kenny Omega. Man, in that match, I watched a little bit of that match, and he looked like he was in serious pain, man. Like, it didn't look like, it was one of those situations where it's like, if he's selling, give him the Oscar, because he looks like he's hurting. I hope he gets better, man. Quick. I would be shocked if he's ready for Mania. That seems a little soon as far as like the speedball match. But man, I hope he's ready for Forbidden Door in June, because that'll be a big, if you think back, the first Forbidden Door was kind of plagued with a bunch of injuries. Punk couldn't make it. Danielson couldn't make it. There was a lot of people missing off of that card. So hopefully Ospreay's not missing off of this one.
We also had QT Marshall in a Twitter war with our favorite Raj Giri, or Guri, however you say his name. I'll let you take the lead on this, because you put this in the news and brought it to my attention. So I'll let you take the lead.
Yeah, I guess Raj Giri, owner of WrestlingInc.com, one of the wrestling news sites. He's pretty known for, to me, he seems like a WWE shill. He's just constantly, he's attacking AEW for things that he kind of lets slide in WWE. But he made a comment about the booking of Wardlow, which I agree with. And QT responded, kind of says, hey, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, kind of alluding to, injuries, booking situations that kind of prevent people from. And I always think about that when we're complaining, like, why did he drop the title? We don't know what's going on in the back.
Yep.
But then that kind of the argument kind of went away, and then the next evening Raj stirred it back up right before Rampage was on the air, and he went on to call QT a ratings poison. Do you really think anyone gives a fuck about you outside of the people you work with directly? You have the personality of a piece of shit. Fuck off, man. And here's the thing. I don't like the QT booking either. I would like him to stay behind the scenes. I don't have an issue with him in certain creative booking spots, being on Dynamite, I don't like it, but I would never attack a guy like
Yeah.
this, especially if I own a website, a news website. And it's just so unprofessional, man. When you're going at wrestlers and you're a quote unquote owner or MMA or wrestling journalist, and you're going back and forth with the people you cover on Twitter, it makes you look like a jabroni, plain and simple. And QT didn't hold back. Raj came out and said, I'll end this here, QT in private. If you ever fucking shit on me again, don't act like you're a success. You're a fucking loser, mate. And I never brag about this shit, but if we need to do it, let's do it in private. And QT responded with, do what in private? We have a building, and I know a great lawyer that can draw up a waiver for you to sign if you'd really like to do this. I genuinely don't mind. Success or not, I'm a grown man willing to put your teeth down your fucking throat if you would like. I mean, these two were going at it. I think Raj came out and issued an apology, like he shouldn't be going back and forth with talent, and QT kind of stuck to his guns on it. I just think biased journalists who run wrestling websites, it, do you think stuff like biased journalism, wrestling news sites, is it good? Is it bad for pro wrestling? Because for me, it's like they're covering it, so there is a good quality to it, but I think people like this, I think it tears down. It's not going to hurt a WWE, but I do think it hurts companies like trying to grow if you're constantly targeting them. It puts a narrative in the fans' minds that keeps a company from growing and shaking off these kind of unsubstantiated narratives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's up to the fans and people to consume the media to just write off wrestling.com and say they're not legitimate anymore, for the reason being this guy is going out there and he clearly can't look at the AEW product without being biased, because now he has a personal hatred towards a guy involved in the product. So, I think that's the slippery slope. Yeah, you can speak your mind. That's the beauty of Twitter and social media. But when you do something like this, now everyone's going to look at that through the scope of, well, you were never going to like it because you hate them personally. So
Right.
I just think this is a bad look for everyone involved. I commend QT Marshall for sticking to his guns, because he tried to be, Raj tried to, troll him on Twitter by challenging him to a fight, thinking QT would back down. Fight him then. You know what I mean? Like, if you think you're going to fight him,
yeah,
put it on tape so we could see it.
I love that QT stood up for himself. And you know what? On the flagship, we're always talking just booking story, our gut feelings, but I respect QT and what he does for that company. He does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and I think he's an underrated in-ring worker, man. I've always said that. I'm just not a fan of what he's doing now, but this, we're fans. We're fans giving our just fan response on our shows. This is a guy who's a quote unquote journalist for one of the bigger wrestling news sites. Wrestling Inc., WrestleZone, Observer, The Torch, PWI. There's a lot of like those type of sites out there. Like, could you imagine if Dave Meltzer or Wade Keller was doing this on Twitter? Like, dude, this is unprofessional.
And when it happens in sports, the competitive sports, I'll use the word real loosely here. NBA, NFL, when that happens, those guys are excommunicated as sources. They're gone. It doesn't happen. So, I mean, there's one-off feuds, of course, with athletes, but if this person was doing this, it completely goes against everything with, I guess, this edict of being an unbiased journalist. There's no way you can be unbiased, because you've shown that you can't be. And that's the source of Twitter, and that's what people's reactionary things do. And you can apologize all you want, but it's out there.
Yeah, Twitter's a cesspool.
Speaking of Twitter, we have our next news here. Eddie Kingston has quit Twitter in support of Riho. So Riho quit Twitter as well because of all the shit that was being tweeted at her from trash scumbag wrestling fans. And Eddie Kingston is getting off Twitter for reasons like we're seeing with QT Marshall and Raj at this point. So Kingston took to Instagram to do it, which was, Instagram is I guess it's picture based. So he's not dealing with as much bullshit. You can mute a lot of different people. You don't have to scroll through because, again, toxicity is the name of the wrestling fandom. It really is.
Yeah, it kills me how he shared the information. He posted a picture of Terry Funk with the words, Terry Funk is the GOAT. And below that, he said, I got rid of my tweeter because I saw some evil shit tweeted at Riho and I'm done. Hats off, man. If a lot of these guys would just say peace, I'm out, Twitter would just be a cesspool wasteland of people bitching about shit. I don't go on there that much. I'll scan for news, but I do not interact with people in there because no matter what you post, no matter what you say on there, the idiots come out with their torches like the angry villagers in Frankenstein and they want your head. So I'm not a fan of Twitter.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it's a good choice. I mean, for your mental health, you guys should have a social media, hiatus. I think it's good for everybody. And I don't answer any comments on my Instagram. If you guys comment on a video that goes viral, if it's like 1,800 people liked it and people are commenting how they hate the Elite, good for you. You can hate the Elite. I'm not going to respond to your awful takes that I obviously disagree with, but I'll respond to my friends on social media, the people that I respect and want to go have a positive conversation, even if we disagree. You know what I mean? It's just, again, the toxicity has no place, even though it exists very prominently in the wrestling business. But
post and ghost, Ace. Post and ghost.
Hashtag post and ghost. We have longtime WWE writer who worked closely with Bray Wyatt, Nick Manfredini. He is a guy who has been very influential in Bray Wyatt's character presentation, the Wyatt Firefly Funhouse, which debuted back in 2019. This is further breadcrumbs alluding to the Bray Wyatt run that came with all the White Rabbit, everything that came with the hype is fizzling out and maybe not long for the product.
Yeah, I mean, this guy very influential in all the promos that Bray had. It's unknown whether he left or he was fired, but there has been rumors of budget cuts looming for WWE. In the past, not so much, I think, in the last couple of years, but in the past, that post Mania time is usually when they start cutting some costs. But 13 years with the company, Nick spent and worked especially close with Wyatt. And it's noted that his departure is unrelated to Wyatt's recent absence. All the bullshit.
Right. Yeah, right.
Come on, man. Come on. I just, where there's smoke, there's fire, man. Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's all I'll say.
We also had someone, so obviously we saw him losing his job, which we hate to see, but we saw a wrestling veteran, Sarah Stock, gaining a job as a producer and backstage coach with All Elite Wrestling. So 13-year veteran. She's been in Impact, CMLL. She's, obviously very influential, a lot of knowledge in that brain. And she's going to give it back to AEW, to the young roster that, maybe she could help construct some matches, give some feedback to the women roster, even the men too, just how to do things better in the ring. And it's always a good thing to have someone who has that many years under her belt.
Yeah. And a signing like this is great for the women's division because, Sarah Stock, she retired from in-ring competition in 2015. And immediately after retiring, she went to WWE's Performance Center and served as a trainer until 2020. So she was like very integral between 2015 and 2020 at the PC for WWE. So PC kind of has that pedigree there coming into AEW. I know everyone, like a lot of fans, just kind of see stuff like that and it kind of glosses over them. But this is how you build a great locker room, a great company. And for a company that's 4 years old, they're still a relatively small organization. They don't have the infrastructure that a WWE has. So I'm always fascinated to see them picking up people, talented people from the business to help build their behind the scenes crew. You know, when they picked up Pat Buck, I was like, man, that's a great signing.
Yep.
Now you have a pipeline to create a pro. Um, I think a lot of these acquisitions by Tony Khan, this is long-term warfare. You're wanting to build a very respectable, knowledgeable group of people in your backstage area, and I think Sarah Stock fits that bill.
So speaking of AEW in the women's division, Mercedes Moné teased a Forbidden Door 2 involvement that we're going to see in June in Toronto. So this was a Q&A panel hosted by Leva Bates at the Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City. Mercedes played coy when asked by a fan about her involvement in the upcoming event in June. So we have a clip here. Let's show it.
So they announced that the Forbidden Door pay-per-view is happening between AEW and New Japan. I was just wondering if you were going to appear there.
Ooh, when is it?
It's in June.
It's in June?
Or July. I'm not exactly
June or
sure.
July? Okay. What day?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know when to show up then. I don't know what. Anybody know the date? I don't know. We gotta see them. June so far, I think could be open. July might be open, but gotta get that phone call. Gotta get that phone call from Unc.
First off, those dudes need to watch wrestling tonight. How do you not know the date of the show going in when you're asked the question? Are you kidding me?
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Come on, guys. You got your big shot. You got the mic in your hand.
Better.
You answer a question. Just pull it up on your phone, dude.
Are you kidding me? June, July, don't know the date. You're asking Mercedes the question. That's the question you had lined up. Just put it in parentheses. Take some goddamn notes. Be professional.
Right.
I want to see Mercedes at the show. I think she will be there, and I'm excited for it.
I think she will too. Who do you think? Maybe I'm an idiot, but when she says Unc, when she refers to Unc, I got to get that phone call from Unc. Who's she talking about?
I assumed it was Tony Khan, but
that's what I assumed too.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have the Uncle Tony vibe, but maybe it's Snoop Dogg who has a relationship with.
Yeah,
is it Snoop Dogg her uncle?
Yeah, I think so. But what's funny about this is, so I think she's going to be there, but this clip kind of ties in with a recent report from the Observer, where it appears that this beautiful relationship between the conglomerate of Bushiroad, which owns New Japan and Stardom, and the current IWGP champion Mercedes Moné could be a short relationship, because Moné has no more dates agreed to for New Japan or Stardom following Stardom's upcoming show on April 23rd. As such, unless an agreement for more dates or a full contract is reached, Moné will once again be entering the free agent market. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that was purposeful on her end because she wanted to test the water, see if she liked doing this, maybe go back to WWE. And listen, the money, while you have the ability to do it, it's Jade Cargill versus Mercedes. Do it at Forbidden Door. Needs
100%.
Speaking of Forbidden Door, we have the rumored match of Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay 2. Seemed like a foregone conclusion prior to being hurt. Obviously, you saw Wrestle Kingdom. The match that they had was unbelievable, potentially match of the year. It's going to be everyone's chasing that match from here on out. Maybe this match could be the one to top it. But obviously, Ospreay's recent shoulder injury, as we mentioned before, makes it challenging to know if this is going to be happening in Toronto. Dave Meltzer says there's hope from both sides, but it makes sense to have, you had one in Japan, now one in America. Maybe a third match can be elsewhere or have it back in Japan. Not sure, but I need this match happening in June. I really do.
I think that would be one of your marquee matches for that event.
And we also have Jay White. Obviously, his tie with New Japan Pro Wrestling was evident. He's coming to an end now. Obviously, he did the loser leaves the promotion match. And now Letter Switchblade has been talking with WWE, yet to sign. He's also been in talks with AEW. Right now, it seems like he's 50-50. Hasn't signed anywhere officially. My gut says WWE is a better fit for him. I know we discussed it. He made his appearance in AEW, and he's he kind of, you want to talk about glossing over. He just kind of glosses over you when he's in AEW, but I think he stands out in WWE, and I think he can make a really big difference of the roster. Talk about opponents for Cody Rhodes, even opponents for Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns. Like Jay White is a served up on a platter main eventer if you use him with the presentation he had in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, I think WWE is definitely the spot where he'll stick out the most. I'm wondering if WWE truly sees value in him. You know, like that's my only question, but I would love to see him in WWE more than AEW.
Speaking of seeing value, we see value in Dave Meltzer's newsletter. Let's get into Dave's raves. Poor Uncle Dave. He's without his Twitter. It was hacked, so now it's gone. He didn't get to respond to Tony Khan's rebuttal to him on Twitter, so maybe he'll be back, maybe not. He finally changed his profile picture. The younger generation finally got rid of that old school PNG picture of a newspaper. It was actually moving forward, but anyway, we're still getting Dave's raves in the old school format, whether it's
dude, when that happened, when Tony Khan clapped back at Dave's little thing, which Dave didn't even mean AEW, he was talking about WWE. But when I saw Tony's response, and I didn't realize that Dave's Twitter had been hacked, so I thought it was one of those troll accounts.
Right.
And I had to click on it, and then I saw that it had like over 300,000 followers. So I was like, no, that's Dave. Something must have happened. Then I read about the hack.
Yeah. People have no lives. But anyway, so match of the week, Aaron Henare versus Shingo Takagi, March 10th, the Yamahashi New Japan Pro Wrestling Cup Night 4, which is the first round. His performer of the week was Kenny Omega for his performance in Toronto in Dynamite. So, I mean, you could have picked anyone from that match. Everyone showed out in that main event on Dynamite.
Yeah.
He also popped in here to talk about the Canadian expansion, which I thought was interesting because he referenced WCW as a history, and why not? You have to use it as a barometer for AEW's success and their failure in the future. We saw AEW announcing 6 Canadian dates this summer, with the major event being the second Forbidden Door on 6/25 in Toronto from the Scotiabank Center, which is the biggest arena they have to offer. But he had said regarding Toronto, there's a similar situation with WCW and AEW. WCW never ran Canada until signing Bret Hart. The first time they were in Toronto for a Nitro, and this is well after the peak, they sold out the Air Canada Center in like 15 minutes. AEW sold out the Coca-Cola Arena for its debut, but it was half the size, but most figured it could be a sold out larger building, but it was booked that night. They didn't sell out Rampage the second night, even though they turned away far more who wanted Dynamite tickets than they drew for Rampage. He continues down here. He said, this was never official, alluding to Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door. We were told before the Tokyo Dome they were working with the idea of 2 matches, Wrestle Kingdom and Forbidden Door, and we don't know the situation with Ospreay's injury, but it'll be interesting what kind of number this show can do. Toronto is traditionally one of the best wrestling markets in the world. What I pulled from this, and it was a much larger conversation that he was having about the Canadian pull of fandom, that you can actually have markets being tested here, and they're doing it much earlier than WCW was willing to do it. And it just shows that maybe Tony Khan is learning from Eric Bischoff and maybe taking a little bit more calculated risk, because the Canadian fans blow up. They love the product.
Yeah. And from everything I've read, they've done really good ratings. Are they TSN maybe up there? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing really good ratings up there. And obviously you've got the Winnipeg connection of Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho. You've got Ethan Page. I mean, I'm excited that they're diving into getting outside the States. I mean, the Canadian shows have been a lot of fun. They've got this 6-date tour. And then I believe in the fall, we're getting England. They're going overseas. So that's going to be fun to see them kind of, because evidently in England, their ratings are through the roof. So I think it's a lot of fun to see everything panning out with their international voyage.
Yeah, he talked about the 1999 Mayhem show they did for WCW, headlined by Benoit and Bret Hart for the WCW title. It drew 12,100 fans, but apparently based on figures, it could have drew as much as 30,000 fans if they booked a bigger building, which has me believing that's why Tony Khan's running, the Scotiabank Center, not running one of the smaller arenas, because obviously, product be damned, 1999 WCW was not a hot product. Wrestling was hot, but for WCW was definitely on its downward slide. It'd be interesting to see the numbers they draw and if they continue to run maybe a consistent basis. I know people were upset Chicago wasn't getting Forbidden Door, but Toronto's the perfect home for it if you want to switch year after year.
Yes. So I just looked up Scotiabank Arena. The capacity's almost 20,000 people. So, man, like, to me, that says they have big plans for Forbidden Door. Like, and I think it goes beyond just Kenny and Will Ospreay.
Right.
I think Mercedes Moné and Jade. I think that's something we need to look for, Ace. I think that's going to happen, man.
So that won't be this week, but we have another slew of wrestling events to preview for you in the week ahead. Let's get to it. All right, we're about 50 minutes into Raw right now, but the Raw from St. Louis, 3/20/23, we have Austin Theory versus Montez Ford, Bianca Belair versus and Asuka teaming up to take on Carmella and Chelsea Green. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson are continuing to be booked like shit, but they're taking on the Maximum Male Models. We're going to get a Logan Paul segment for his Impulsive podcast, so being filmed live on Raw. And Roman Reigns is going to be live in the building filming a segment with Cody Rhodes. So decent Raw on tap for Monday.
Yeah, that Impulsive podcast is just awful. Like,
I've never listened. I've just seen clips of Cody Rhodes like drinking the Prime drink. That's all I've seen.
He had a couple good people in there that I wanted to check out, and Logan isn't that bad on the show, but man, he has this one co-host on there that's just unbearable. Can't do it, man. Can't do it. And you're right on the money with Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. Those guys took the payday, but good God, they haven't done shit with them.
Yeah, horrendous. On SmackDown 3/24, we have LA Knight versus Rey Mysterio. Clearly, we're going to get Dominic involved in some way, and we're going to get the fallout of the reunion of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Cody Rhodes will be tied into this. We're right on the cusp of WrestleMania. This is the second to last SmackDown before the big show, so I would say they're going to put the heat on whatever program they don't feel like has enough heat on it.
Yeah, so SmackDown is, to me, like, that's where all the juice is happening for the most part. Like, that's they bring out the big guns typically, at least in their bigger storylines.
For AEW Dynamite on the 22nd, we have the AEW Tag Team Championship on the line. The Guns are defending against Top Flight. Of course, we talk about the dream match, Kenny Omega and El Hijo del Vikingo. Jon Moxley taking on the newest addition to the All Elite Wrestling roster, Stu Grayson, Tony Storm versus Sky Blue. And we have the FTW Championship and no DQ match, Hook versus Stokely Hathaway. So decent card here, headlined by Kenny Omega versus Vikingo. And again, I'll say it here. If you don't know who Vikingo is, that's your own fault. It's not 1996. You don't need Mike Tenay to tell you what you should like and what you shouldn't like.
These dream matches, we need story. Like,
you don't need story for this match. It speaks for itself. And there is story, by the way, if you can find it. If you can read. Can you read?
If you're talking just on-screen story, okay. But don't come at me with this. Every fucking match on my TV has to have story. Every company does this to some degree. And I am beyond happy with the dream match to on-screen storytelling ratio that AEW provides. We rarely get these dream matches on Dynamite. So when you can pull out a Vikingo versus Omega and give it to me in a main event on a Wednesday night, give it to me. Inject it into my veins.
And also too, to go back to it, there is a story. They were supposed to wrestle at AAA for the Mega Championship, December 2021. And unfortunately for everybody, Kenny Omega got hurt and the match never happened. Again, just because you didn't read about the story, you weren't watching the product, doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like, there is a story. I mean, maybe AEW can show that on their screen, but they shouldn't have to. Again, it's not 1996. Mike Tenay used to be that person to do these one-off matches when you'd have guys from Mexico just showing up. Guess what? Rey Mysterio was a one-off before. Maybe you'll fall in love with Vikingo if you open your eyes and you're open to it.
Dude, it's Fed brain shit, man. It's that it has to be told. There has to be a video package on Dynamite to tell me. No. Like, maybe this one just isn't for you. This is for the fans that keep track a little more. And I think some fans, like, there's people that talk about matches and they don't even watch the matches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm talking about the show, but I didn't even watch the show. Like,
Yeah.
if you're that person, then you're definitely not going to dig deeper onto what happened in AAA and the mega champion, because that's when Kenny was the belt collector. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like,
He was. Yeah. He just lost to Hangman at Full Gear. He was on the tail end of all the titles. And then,
right.
and then Vikingo won the vacated title because Kenny Omega had to relinquish it due to injury. Story. It's fucking story.
It's story.
But, you know, also, too, to go back to it, I'm going to reiterate the fact, 1996 in WCW, Psychosis, Rey Mysterio, La Parka, they were all one-off things on WCW. The only thing is Mike Tenay was put in the booth and said, this is what you should know about them, because we didn't have the luxury of having Google, the internet, or even a compilation clip on YouTube. You can be your own Mike Tenay. Do it.
You're spot on. Like, the entire cruiserweight division of WCW was built off of that. But just to bring it in for the Fed brain people out there, WWE does this shit too in their own universe. When Enzo and Cass debuted, what happened? They came out. It didn't happen on Raw. They didn't give us a package. They didn't give us anything. This happened on their little network show. And you know what happened? As soon as they came out, what'd Michael Cole do? Oh, this is Enzo and Cass. They're the most popular team in NXT. It's the same thing in their own little universe. They do the same shit, but they don't catch hell for it. We didn't get a package telling us who Enzo and Big Cass was. It's the same thing.
Yep. All right. Speaking of Ring of Honor, you guys can catch us on Honor side. Thank you for the love for Colton and I. Mullet.mania. Follow him. He's a great guy. Shane Taylor versus Silas Young, and we're going to get Aussie Open versus Chris Daniels and Matt Sydal building up Supercard of Honor. I'd imagine Aussie Open and Chris Daniels and Matt Sydal will be involved in that ladder match, Reach for the Sky at Supercard of Honor to crown new tag team champions, along with the Kingdom potentially having, obviously maybe we're going to have the team of Top Flight involved in that as well. Maybe you're going to have their feet in both little areas here, but I love it so far.
Yeah. I'm pumped for it. ROH crushing it. I'm loving it.
We'll preview that card next week, I think, on next Monday. So we'll talk about that. For Impact, they have a pay-per-view this week, 3/24. So Impact Sacrifice will air Friday, March 24th from St. Clair College in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. We get some good matches here. I mean, Impact's Knockouts World Title, Jordan Grace versus Mickie James. We're going to be getting the Impact World Tag Team titles. TMDK, Shane Hayes and Mikey Nichols versus the Bullet Club, Ace Austin, Chris Bay. We're going to get Bully Ray versus Tommy Dreamer. The World Championship on the line. Josh Alexander. Actually, I'm sorry. The World Champions teaming with Frankie Kazarian, Rich Swann versus Time Machine, which is Kushida, and the Motor City Machine Guns. Pretty top-heavy card here. And, of course, John Gresham versus Mike Bailey, too.
Great matches. Impact's crushing it. Check it out, man. Underrated. Very underrated.
And again, we'll preview the Impact New Japan Pro Wrestling Multiverse United show from the Globe Theater in Los Angeles coming soon. That card is becoming stacked as well. That's the Mike Bailey versus Will Ospreay match that unfortunately we may not get. And of course, we also have MLW Underground happening next week. Alex Hammerstone versus Jacob Fatu, and Taya Valkyrie on the tour of dropping all her titles. She's going to be taking on Billy Starks. And then at War Chamber on 4/6, she's going to be defending her featherweight championship against Delmi Exo. So she's going to, doing the right thing. Tony Khan's letting her do the things she needs to do, dropping her titles as she goes through Impact, and MLW finishing up her duties. So MLW War Chamber happening the week after WrestleMania, but it's still going to be a fun card.
Huge. Alex Hammerstone, Jacob Fatu. That's the one everyone's looking forward to, man.
And not to mention Lince Dorado versus Leo Rush for the middleweight championship. That match should bang as well. Like I said, Willie Mack also is over there versus Enzo. Willie Mack killed it on Eye for an Eye GCW. We mentioned Masha win the title, but goddamn, Willie Mack is killing it across wherever he is. That dude deserves a full platform to do his thing, because I said it before, I'll say it again. I think Willie Mack is one of the more talented wrestlers in the world. And if you haven't seen him, go out and check. Because when he shows up on a one-off on Dynamite, by the way, maybe just for a second you'd fall in love with him. Like, same thing, you might fall in love with Vikingo. He might be your favorite wrestler in 20 years.
Yeah.
Open your mind, guys.
Well, that's it, right, Ace?
That's all we got, man. We fit under 2 hours, you and I, abiding by the time limits, and I think we did a good job of covering everything. We got rid of results. If you guys want results, it's going to be scattered throughout. I feel like it was one of the more segments that we were breezing over and it wasn't meaningful for you guys. So I wanted to jam pack a little bit more condensed into more informative conversation.
Yeah. Guys, visit the Turnbuckle Tavern, .com, theturnbuckletavern.com to get everything we got. Subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. That's where we do all of our stuff at.
Hell yeah, man. This is a pleasure as always. Tune into the rest of the week of the Tavern. We obviously got Honor Society, as I mentioned. We got the flagship coming up on Thursday morning, but we also have a Visit the Tavern happening next Friday. Jack Tomlinson's going to be visiting us on Friday. I'm going to be filming with him on Wednesday prior to Dynamite. So he's going to be coming out here. He's in the second time I'm interviewing him, but he's a guy to check out. We spoke about Creator Pro. That's a dude who's in that fold as well.
That'll be great.
Well, that's all we got, Chad. Let's say goodbye to the audience and see. We'll see them throughout the week in wrestling. You see our faces all over the place, but for wrestling tonight, we're bidding you guys adieu.
Yeah, guys. Until next time, keep it snug, keep it stiff, and we'll see you next week.
Reach for the sky, boy.